Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Islam in Life with me, Raza Ghazim. The ability of Muslims to assert their Islamic identity as a community seems to be woefully inadequate. Is that down to the roots of how the Muslim community developed within the European context? On the whole, the history of the initial migrant community to Europe is a law-abiding one and is in stark contrast to the European migration to the Americas, where whole-scale stealing of land and resources, as well as the enslavement of people, was part and parcel. Relatively speaking, nothing to be ashamed of. So why the lack of confidence?
A debate has been raging over whether Muslims in the West have gained in confidence or have sunk further with increasing Islamophobia. A European Muslim can follow Muslim principles but be European by culture. Confidence means you know who you are and you have the right to be where you are. In order to be seen as confident, the culture must change from one of compliance to one of resistance.
For me, it's a slightly difficult question because I'm a revert. So most of my life I've been Christian. And so I can really only express my experience for myself rather than the Muslim community. Firstly, I don't live in a Muslim community. I live in a very Christian white area. And I'm only in the community when I come for my studies. So there's a huge difference between two aspects of my life. When I'm within a Muslim community, I feel able to dress Islamically with hijab, and I feel much more comfortable and in some ways safer as a Muslim.
If you look into Islam itself, Prophet Muhammad, he did let go of many practices of the ignorance of Arabia. But he did keep many of the practices as well. So, I mean, cultural and religious, it's not hard to mix, but there's always a boundary of not going extreme in either way. That's where the harmony lies.
Joining us to discuss this topic is esteemed guest, Professor Tariq Ramadan. Welcome to the program.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam. I wanted to start off by asking, is the confidence of Muslims being challenged in the West? And how is that lack of confidence manifesting itself?
Yes, I think you're right. If we look at what is happening in all the Western countries, from Northern America, Canada, or the States, to Europe, all the way to Australia, you can see that there is a lack of confidence and there is a crisis about how are we going to deal with this new environment. And in fact, it's a new environment, but it's not so new if we look at the history, and we might talk about this. The second thing is we also have to look at the political pressure, day in, day out. What you hear everywhere in the West, that integration is failing, it doesn't work, the Muslims are not integrating. So there is a narrative that is coming and imposed onto the Muslims that it's not working. So they are not really part of the Western societies. And I would say that the starting point is really to reassess this and to consider our way of dealing with this, because confidence should come from the very understanding of our historical experience.
And that leads me on to the next question. You know, what is the history of Muslims and Islam in the West? I mean, obviously you could write a whole thesis on that, but very briefly.
I think if we should understand that there are three things that we have to keep in mind. If we look, for example, at the European migration, when the Muslims were coming mainly from North African countries, or Turkey, Pakistan, all the people who came in Europe were, in fact, in Western Europe, were, in fact, very modest social classes and coming with no real, as workers, and no real Islamic background. So they came after the First World War and mainly after the Second World War in Western European countries.
But there was an Islamic culture that they brought with them, surely.
Of course, and that's the point. But in fact, they were not even getting a clear understanding of what is Islamic, what is cultural, what is coming from our. So they came with a very modest or very modest knowledge about who they were as Muslims, and on very superficial understanding of what the European countries were. We should not forget, when we speak about Western Muslims and European Muslims, Eastern Europe, where you have Muslims who are there for centuries. For example, we discovered that there were Muslims in Bosnia when the massacres occurred in the 80s and the 90s. But you had people in Bosnia, in ex-Yugoslavia, who were Muslims for centuries. So when you speak about, oh, these European Muslims are new, no, look, we should not, in fact, reduce Europe to Western Europe. If you look now at what happened in the United States, for example, in Canada, the Muslim migration and the way they settled there were people who were much more educated. They came as medical doctors or engineers. So their background or their religious background was much more developed, and also their social integration within the American dream was completely different. Which, in fact, what we have to compare is mainly this very modest background that we find with people who came to Europe, with the African American Muslims who are in the inner city experiencing exactly the same problem of social discrimination added to the fact that they are Muslims with a very superficial sometimes understanding of what Islam for the great majority of them, even though we have scholars who are coming from this from the African American communities, Muslim African American communities in the States. So this is where we understand that the typology of the migrants, without forgetting that we also have converts that are coming from within, that are also expressing a type of Western Muslim presence.
Within that context, because it's a very large group of people and it spans continents, and it's somehow perhaps a difficult question to ask in a way, but what are the dilemmas? Because we're talking about confidence of Muslims. What are the dilemmas facing Muslims in those different areas? Perhaps you might want to focus on one area.
Yeah, there is something which is the starting point of everything. The lack of confidence as to where you are starts with the lack of confidence as to who you are. So there is clearly something which has to do with defining the self, defining what you call the Muslim identity. Who am I? And then this is something which is essential here. So if you don't know and you enter into a new environment, a new society where you don't know who you are, you don't know what is religious, what is cultural, what are your principles, what are the priorities, and you think the only way for me to be faithful to Islam is to live my life as I was living my life in the country of origin, it's not going to work. And you are going to lose confidence about who you are. Add to this that when you don't know the language of the country, when the power or the reality of political struggle within the society and the history within the society, if you don't know about all this, of course you don't know, so you don't know how to deal with it, so you prefer to isolate yourself. So the first step of isolation is natural. The second step of openness towards the society is the more difficult, because you have to be equipped. If you are not, you can lose confidence. As to this, as I said, that the mainstream media and political and intellectual discourse in the West, and mainly in Europe, but now it's exactly the same in the United States of America and in Canada, is saying it doesn't work. These Muslims are not integrating. So if you, day in, day out, you understand this, so there is okay, it might be me who has a problem, who have a problem, or the surrounding society. So you nurture a sense of tension and lack of confidence, and this is where we have to work on self-education and at the same time educating people about the environment.
One thing that I want to pick up slightly in what you said, and with regards to the people who came initially and about them understanding a sense of themselves and where they're actually at. If we look at it in terms of, say, the demonization of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, say, for example, that took place with Salman Rushdie, and then it took place, decades later with the cartoons that were there. You had huge amounts of people coming out with confidence and protesting against Rushdie, whereas that same kind of, while there were lots of people coming out, that level of people and numbers and so on and so forth coming out to protest wasn't there. So it seems to suggest, in a sense, a little bit opposite of what you're saying, that the confidence was there initially and it's been lost as the generations have gone on. What would you say to that?
That's a good point, but I don't agree with that. I would say it's not because you protest that you have confidence. It might be exactly the opposite. I saw so many people who have no confidence and they are shouting. Shouting is not a sign of confidence. It's just a sign that you are not happy. But if, for example, if I have somebody attacking me and I take a critical intellectual distance by saying I'm not going to react, I know what you want. You are going to provoke me and I take a distance. This is where you are much more powerful. You are confident with your... So shouting and demonstrating is just saying I'm not happy. So the emotional reaction doesn't mean a spiritual strength. It's not the same. So I would say that what we have now with people saying, what happened with in the Netherlands with Geert Wilders coming and saying I'm going to insult the Quran and to to tear it apart, and then what was the reaction of the Muslims? Nothing. And say we're not going to react on this, not because they were lacking confidence, because they were knowledgeable about be careful. This is a provocation, and he wants you to react in a way which is showing that in fact you are the other. So you are the other through your emotional reaction. So confidence is deeper than that. Confidence is about know yourself, know what are your principles, know who you are and what you want. First, by knowing that what is coming from the culture of origin, many things are good and many things you have to let them there because they are not Islamic per se. They are more Arabic culture or African culture or Asian culture than Islamic principles. So you have first to and then you also have to nurture something which is very important. When do you feel confident? When you have the 3 L's. First, you know the language of the country. So you speak English as the English people. So you have, you are a citizen. So you have to, know how to speak. And when you speak, it's not only the language, it's not only the words and the terminology, it's the culture that is coming out of language. So this is important. You respect the law of the country. We don't have a problem with. We are law-abiding, as you said at the beginning. This is it. And so you are confident. So I have duties, I know, but I have rights as well. I'm not going to let you do what you do. If this is racist, you will find me. If this is attacking me, Islamophobia, you will find me. So you know the law. And then you are loyal to the country. And loyalty is also something which is important. But the problem is that some of the Muslims, they think that loyalty is to say, yes, yes, sir, which is not loyalty. This is giving up on citizenship. It's to be able to say to the government, in the name of my citizenship, my loyalty to this country is to say yes when you are right, but I'm going to say no and to be resisting and critical when you do something which is wrong. This is the way you show confidence. It's not only to demonstrate, it's to have a very clear understanding of what are your priorities.
Lots of interesting points being made. We appreciate your contribution to our discussion on the social media. Here is what you sent us this week.
This week we asked, can religious and cultural principles be different but harmonious? Mohammed from Ethiopia said, yes, if the cultural principles do not contradict the fundamental principle of religions. Sabira from Canada said, they can be, if both sides are confident enough of their own identity. Conflict happens when one party is insecure of its own beliefs and then resents imposition by the other. And Saida from Nigeria said, yes, all religions teach the same basic values of humanity, so they can be harmonious. As for cultures, people can agree to disagree if there's mutual respect for each other. That's all the comments we have for this week. If you'd like to have your comments featured on the show, be sure to follow us on Facebook or join us on Twitter.
It's quite interesting, Larry. One of the things that you talked about is this idea of law and so on. And one of the things that has happened recently in the UK, for example, is the passing of a law which is talking about the prevent agenda. And within that context, I was in a meeting fairly recently, and people were talking about complying and implementing that particular agenda, as opposed to resisting it. There is a severe lack of confidence within the Muslim community because compliance is seen to be the way forward as opposed to resistance. What do you say to that?
Yes, I completely agree with you that the problem is to be law-abiding and say, you know what, for example, they are talking about dealing with violent extremism. Even, you know, in 2005 in this country, we were talking about, they were talking about radicalization, and we changed the word saying it's violent extremists. How are we going to deal with this? And I saw Muslims, they wanted so much to show that they are loyal to the country, loyal to the government, that everything was about compliance. Okay, we are going to show you that we are not extremists, and these people are not representing us. And at the end say, what are you doing? You're not even helping this government to deal with the problem, because the problem has nothing to do with complying with more security and monitoring the people. It's about education, it's about social justice. It's also about being able to say what you are doing there has an impact here. So if you tell us that your foreign policy has no impact on the domestic policy, you are lying, because they are saying it. So you need to be courageous enough to say, no, I'm not going to buy everything that you are saying. So a true citizen, and especially Muslims, especially Muslim citizens in Britain, should be able to have an added value in the discussion by saying, no, the equation or the terms of the equation that you are putting to us are wrong. So no, that's not what we have. So they are so scared that at the end they are confusing being a citizen as being accepting everything which is coming from the government. And the government, all the government, by the way, it's not only the British. We have exactly the same in France, when you have people, you know, they are chanting the La Marseillaise and showing how French they are, to say we are for Charlie. You say, what do you mean by that? What do you mean? Do you want to be Paris and you forget to be Beirut and to forget to be all the countries and all the... What is this? This is not helping the West. This is not to be dignified in the way you have. And it's not only about resistance, because sometimes we have to be with our government. No, our government are not always wrong, but sometimes they are wrong. So a true citizen committed to justice and principle should be on this adding and coming with an added value, which, you know what we need now in the West? What we need? Which type of Western Muslims we need? A bit more courageous, that they are very faithful to their principles and not buying everything the government is asking them to do.
But this is the crux of the problem. You're identifying that this is where the problem lies, and yet you'll have queues upon queues of people who'll be more than happy to go along and not only say yes, 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 as you were saying, but also implementing the laws because of the position that they're in, whether they're a teacher, whether they're a social worker, whether they're a doctor or whatever, in particular with regards to the prevent, saying, okay, this is what we are going to be doing, although you know that there is no proof about this. So how do you change that mindset? Because that's what it comes down to, doesn't it? You talk about that that's the solution, but is there going to be a solution?
You know, we have to be realistic. It was, in history, it was always the case that you have even scholars, who are the scholars of the Sultan or the scholars of the government. They were ready to buy their religion just to be acknowledged. We have people who are longing so much for recognition and social recognition that they will be ready to sell everything. And we have this everything. Just here in Britain, in France, in the United States, I saw people for just entering the State Department, they are ready for everything. We know that. Now, they might be lost. we have to deal with the people who have an understanding, and we have to respect the grassroots level and the people at the grassroots, and try to go through this education, and just to go for the civil education, the civic education, which is very important, and then to be there. So the problem is that we are losing ground with some of the Salafi literalists that are telling you, you know what, there is only one way to be a good Muslim. Don't do politics, isolate yourself, and just be happy with what is happening in Saudi Arabia, and that's it. So that's not the answer. On the other side, people saying, oh, no, this is completely wrong. Let us be within the government, and we will show them that we are as British, as French, as German as they are. And I would say that's not the answer. The true answer, which is the middle path, which is you are German, you are British, but you have principles. And these you belong to your principles. So anything that has to do with your social commitment, your political awareness, your presence in the West should be the added value of your ethical presence. Your ethical presence is when it's right, but when you are doing wrong, I'm going to speak out. Not only demonstrating, it has to do with a long process. It's a long-run vision that we need, and this is why the Muslims are losing confidence, because no one is representing. There is no structure. We are divided, so there is no intra-community dialogue. We are divided within, and you have a narrative which is putting us outside the Western narrative. So at the end, we are losing confidence. While I can tell you something, that on the ground, after 2 generations, what is happening is a silent revolution. Because we improved so much in our understanding of the West, in our understanding of our religion, so we should not be influenced by this narrative, which is colonizing our mind and giving us the wrong picture of the reality.
One of the reasons that people sometimes cite or are fearful of is that if they go down that route of resisting, they raise their head above the parapet, you know, it's going to get chopped off. So how do you overcome that fear? Because sometimes the results are actually quite interestingly very positive when that head is raised above the parapet. But
they are right. They are right. It's not going to be easy. If you speak out, you also have to pay a price. You need to know this. You need to know this. I was prevented from entering the United States because I was speaking out. We paid a price, and we are ready. The only thing which is important is not to go there alone. This has to be thought, and this has to be structure. It's not just somebody who is going to speak out and being courageous, and that's it. No, it's something which is very much a social movement, a movement of thought that is coming with this by saying, in fact, we have to ask ourselves, what is our role in the West? To be accepted? This is what you want? You want to be tolerated? I like Karen Armstrong talking to Muslims, say, what's that? Who is here to be accepted? And then at the end, we have some Muslims, the only thing is just to be accepted. Even when they are organizing a conference, they are very happy because people of other faiths are happy with what they are saying. And they think it's a success when they are happy. No, it's a success when you say what you have to say, when you are the added value within the society. So I would say we can understand this being scared and afraid that at the end is going to be difficult. But yes, it's going to be difficult. And if we are following in the footsteps of all the messengers for Moses and Jesus and the prophet, peace be upon them all, they came to spread peace, and they were facing the people. So we should be ready to face the people. And we have to be clear that we are facing the corrupt, we are facing the people who are exploiting, we are facing the unjust, we are facing people who are telling us in the name of collateral damage we can go and kill civilians. We are saying no. We are against the terrorists, but we are against anything. And we are for freedom. So anything which is about security and monitoring us, today they are saying we monitor Muslims. At the end they are monitoring all the citizens, and all our fellow citizens should understand it's not only about Islam, it's about monitoring all of us.
And going back to that question, that in order, it seems like a chicken and egg situation, that in order to do all of these things you have to have the confidence, but we know that the confidence isn't there. So final thoughts, how can this break out of that cycle and actually take that leap and say, okay, actually, the confidence is there, we're going to do something?
You know, I think that we need to change the way we look at the reality. And I think that this is very important. Things are moving since over 30 years. What we are now doing is much more positive than what the people are saying. And remember, if we are so much criticized now, remember the African proverb. When people are starting to throw stones on the fruit tree, it's because the tree is bearing its fruit. So there are hopes and there are signs that things are on the right way.
Very interesting proverb to end on. Sadly, the lack of awareness amongst Muslims about the importance of their own history, about the importance of their own morality, has sadly led to a collective amnesia of their own importance with regards to the assertion of their own identity. This has been compounded by the culture of compliance that afflicts many Muslim communities out of a fear of repercussions if they raise their head above the parapet. In order to be seen as confident, the culture must change from one of compliance to one of resistance. That's all the time we have today. Thank you, Professor Tariq Ramadan, and thank you all for watching. Goodbye.